The palace of Elisoria had never seemed so vast, nor so hollow. High ceilings glittered with chandeliers of Venetian glass, and gilded walls echoed with the silent weight of courtly expectation. Yet, despite its splendor, Queen Seraphina felt the chill of loneliness creep into every gilded corridor. She had been queen for 2 years, crowned not by ambition but by fate, after her beloved husband, King Alaric, was taken by fever that no physician could cure. The people called her the Widow Queen, some with tenderness, others with doubt. They admired her beauty, dark hair that fell like a raven's wing against pale skin, eyes the gray of storm-tossed seas, but whispered behind silk, gloved hands that she was too fragile to rule. The council pressed her daily toward a new marriage, toward alliances that would bind her throne with security. Yet Seraphina, though gentle in manner, possessed a will forged by grief. She had loved once with all her soul. She would not wed again simply to appease men who did not know the shape of her heart. But duty was a heavier crown than gold. Each day she signed decrees, settled disputes, and performed the rituals of monarchy. Each night, when the candles were snuffed and courtiers dismissed, she walked her private chambers with steps that echoed her solitude. She longed to breathe beyond palace walls, to know her people not through reports and petitions but through their laughter, their struggles, their daily lives. Thus began her secret. It was under the hood of a plain wool cloak that Seraphina slipped past the guards one cold evening. The city below the palace hill teemed with life, the smell of roasted chestnuts curling into the air, the clang of blacksmiths shaping iron, the chatter of merchants calling out wares. She walked unnoticed among them, her silken voice muted, her regal bearing cloaked in humility. For the first time since her coronation, she felt the pulse of the kingdom not as queen, but as a woman. It was on one such hidden journey that she found him. The soldier lay crumpled in the shadows of an alley, blood darkening his torn uniform. His face, smeared with dirt and ash, bore the look of one who had seen the battlefield's cruel hand. Seraphina knelt without hesitation, her gloved hands pressing against the wound in his side. His eyes fluttered open, startlingly blue, the color of a clear midsummer sky, and he whispered hoarsely, "Leave me." But she did not leave. With effort, she coaxed him to his feet, guiding him through narrow streets to a healer's hut at the edge of the quarter. All the while, his weight leaned against her slight frame, his breath ragged, his pride too battered to resist her strength. In the lamplight of the healer's home, she saw him fully young, though wearied by war, broad-shouldered, though weakened by blood loss, his jaw set with the kind of stubbornness that refused surrender. He never asked her name. He never guessed who she was. To him, she was but a cloaked stranger who had not abandoned him when death drew near. The healer tended his wound, muttering about the folly of soldiers and the cruelty of generals who sent boys to die for glory. Seraphina stayed until dawn, when the soldier's breathing grew steady and his fever broke. She should have returned to the palace then, before her absence was noted. Yet, when his hand shifted faintly toward hers in restless sleep, she lingered, drawn to a presence that stirred something in her long, silent heart. As she slipped away with the morning light, she did not know his name, only that fate had placed him in her path, and that she, Queen Seraphina of Elisoria, had crossed a threshold she could never retreat from. The palace bells tolled the morning hour as Queen Seraphina slipped back through its guarded gates. She returned cloaked in silence, her cheeks flushed not from the chill of dawn, but from the peril of her secret. No one stopped her, not the sentries at the archways, nor the handmaidens who lit her chamber fires. To them she had never left. Yet beneath her composure, her heart beat with the reckless thrill of freedom. All day she sat upon the throne of carved ivory, her crown glimmering under shafts of light that pierced the stained glass. Petitioners came with pleas for bread, for justice, for mercy. She listened with patient grace, answering as a queen should. But her thoughts wandered, again and again, to the nameless soldier whose life she had carried in her hands. His blue eyes haunted her, a brightness even fever could not dim. She had felt his weight against her shoulder, had seen the vulnerability of a man stripped of armor and pride. He was no longer just a stranger. He was a question lodged deep within her soul. That night, as moonlight spilled over the palace gardens, Seraphina resolved to return. She cloaked herself once more and slipped into the city like a shadow. The streets were quieter now, the revelry of the markets hushed beneath the hour's solemn hush. Her path led her to the healer's humble dwelling, where a faint glow from within marked the endurance of the oil lamp. She knocked softly, her hand trembling though she could not name why. The healer, a woman bent with years but sharp-eyed as any hawk, opened the door. Recognition flickered in her gaze, though not of royalty, only of a cloaked stranger who had dared to stay through the night. "You've returned," the healer said, voice low. "He lives, thanks to you." Serafina stepped inside. The room smelled of herbs and smoke, of earth and humanity far from the polished marble of the palace, and there upon a narrow cot lay the soldier. His chest rose and fell with steady rhythm, the fever broken, his wounds bound in clean linen. His hair, dark, matted from battle, fell across his brow, and his lips curved faintly as though dreaming of peace long denied. At the sound of her footsteps, his eyes opened. For a moment, he stared in bewilderment, as if unsure whether she were real or some apparition from the battlefield. Then recognition softened his gaze. "You came back," he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. Serafina inclined her head, unable to speak. She did not know why her throat tightened so. Perhaps it was the relief of seeing him alive, or the danger of the truth she carried behind her disguise. He shifted slightly, wincing at the tug of stitches. "I owe you my life. Tell me your name, that I might carry it with me as a debt never to be forgotten." Her heart lurched. She could not speak her true name, not here, not now. So she offered him only part of herself, the part that belonged not to the throne but to the woman who had knelt beside him in blood and shadow. "Call me Sarah," she said softly. He studied her as though weighing the honesty of her gift. Then he nodded, accepting it without question. "Sarah," he repeated, as if tasting the name upon his tongue. "I am Kale." Kale. The name struck her with quiet force, anchoring him in her memory. No longer a nameless soldier, no longer a passing encounter. He was Kyle, a man who had nearly died in obscurity, and yet now stood at the crossroads of her destiny. Over the days that followed, Serafina returned again and again. Always cloaked, always careful. She brought bread and fruit hidden in her satchel, books of poetry to ease the long hours of his recovery. At first, their conversations were light. Born of courtesy, she asked of his pain. He spoke of the healer's remedies. But slowly, like embers coaxed into flame, their words deepened. He told her of the battlefield, not in tales of glory, but in murmurs of mud-blood and brothers lost. He had been a common soldier, no rank of note, sent to fight in border skirmishes, where victories were few and suffering plentiful. He spoke of a home he had not seen in years, a small farmstead where his mother tended fields alone since his father's passing. His voice carried both pride and guilt, for though he had marched in service to the crown, he had left behind all that tethered him to life beyond war. And Serafina listened, not as a queen seeking reports, but as a woman whose heart opened with each word. She drank in his honesty, his bitterness, his quiet courage. In his presence, she was not the widow queen burdened by duty. She was simply Sarah, a woman with hands that trembled when their fingers brushed while passing a book, a woman who found herself smiling at his dry humor, a woman who remembered, with aching clarity, what it felt like to be alive. Yet with every visit, the risk grew. She knew it. The healer's eyes lingered longer upon her, suspicion flickering in their depths. The streets whispered with rumors of a cloaked lady tending a wounded soldier. And still Serafina could not stay away. For each time she left Kyle's side, the world seemed colder, emptier, less real. And each time she returned, her heart carried her closer to a precipice from which there would be no turning back. As summer's breath warmed the city and Kyle's strength slowly returned, he looked at her one evening with eyes that seemed to see far beyond the walls of that humble room. "You have the air of someone who carries more than she says," he murmured. "You hide it well, but not from me." Her breath caught. Did he suspect? Did he know? But he only smiled faintly, as if to spare her. "Whatever it is, thank you for choosing to carry me too." His words struck her like a vow unspoken. And as the last light of day melted into dusk, Serafina realized that the crown upon her head had never felt heavier, nor her heart more dangerously free. The days lengthened, and with them Kyle's strength. Where once he could scarcely sit upright without pain, he now managed to stand, his weight balanced gingerly upon legs that had nearly failed him. The healer remarked often that his recovery was remarkable, almost unnatural in its speed. But Kale credited not the herbs and salves, but the quiet presence of the cloaked woman who visited faithfully, her voice a balm as much as her care. To him she was Sira, nothing more, nothing less. But to Seraphina, each passing hour beside him was a thread pulled tighter in a tapestry she had no power to unweave. She laughed more easily in that dim little room than she had in the gilded halls of her palace. She spoke with candor unguarded, allowing glimpses of her heart that no courtier had ever been permitted to see. Sometimes she spoke of her late husband, never naming him as king, only as a man she had loved and lost. Kyle listened with a gravity rare among men his age, never interrupting, never pressing beyond what she offered. Other times, she asked him to recite the names of the stars he had learned as a boy upon his father's farm. He did so with a soft reverence, pointing toward the sliver of night visible through the healer's small window, as though the heavens themselves were closer when he spoke them aloud. And yet, with intimacy came risk. Rumors had begun to stir in the market streets. A cloaked lady, they said, had been seen slipping through alleys at strange hours. Some claimed she carried loaves of bread to the poor, others that she sought forbidden company. The city was a cauldron of whispers, and whispers, Seraphina knew, had a way of boiling over into dangerous truths. Still, she could not stay away. One evening, as cicadas droned, and the scent of honeysuckle drifted through the healer's open door, Kyle surprised her with a request. "Walk with me," he said. His hand pressed against his side, but his eyes shone with determination. "I've spent too long staring at these walls. I want to see the sky again. Not from a window, but as a man standing beneath it." Her first instinct was refusal. Too dangerous, too exposed. But when she saw the plea in his gaze, the boyish yearning beneath the soldier's scars, her resolve wavered. She nodded. Together they stepped into the twilight. The air was warm, the cobblestones still radiating the heat of the day. Kale leaned on her arm, his strength not yet what it had been, but each step forward seemed to restore a fragment of himself. They walked slowly, their shadows stretching long against the walls, their silence broken only by the occasional song of a night bird. They came to a small square where a fountain murmured softly. Children played nearby, their laughter ringing like bells, while their mothers chatted on benches. No one looked twice at them. Just another soldier with his sweetheart, perhaps, or two wanderers finding solace in each other's company. For Seraphina, it was intoxicating. For the first time in years, she was unseen, ordinary, free. Kyle lowered himself to the fountain's edge, gazing upward at the stars just beginning to pierce the indigo sky. "Do you see them?" he asked, pointing. "There, the hunter, with his bow drawn, and there, the maiden with her crown of light." Her breath caught at the last word, a crown. How strange, how cruel, that even here among stars and shadows, she could not escape the symbol of her fate. Yet Kale said it without knowledge, without suspicion, his voice soft with memory rather than mockery. She smiled, though it trembled. "Yes, I see them." For a moment, it was perfect, but perfection, she knew, was fleeting. From across the square, two men in the livery of palace guards entered, their torches casting halos of light. They passed without glance, yet Seraphina's heart seized in her chest. Had they seen her? Did they recognize her beneath the cloak's hood? She gripped Kyle's arm tighter, urging him gently to stand. "We should go," she whispered. He looked at her, puzzled. "Why? What danger is there here?" "Please," she pressed, unable to explain. Reluctantly, he rose, and together they retreated into the narrow streets, the sound of the fountain fading behind them. Only when the healer's hut was once more in sight did she release the breath she had been holding. Kale studied her as they entered, his eyes narrowing with quiet curiosity. "You fear them?" he said, not as a question but as a truth observed. She turned away, unfastening her cloak with trembling fingers. "It is complicated." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet steady. "Who are you, Sira?" Truly, her pulse thundered. She longed to tell him, to unburden herself of the secret that threatened to suffocate her. But the weight of the crown was iron upon her shoulders, and the memory of oaths sworn in marble halls bound her tongue. So she only shook her head, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Someone who cannot be who she wishes to be." For a long moment, silence hung between them, thick with unsaid truths. Then Kale released her hand, his expression unreadable. "Then let me be enough for who you are, here, now." It was a simple sentence, yet it struck her like an arrow to the heart. And as she sat beside him in the dim lamplight, Seraphina knew that every step further into his world was another step away from the safety of her throne. The path before her was perilous, shrouded in secrecy and shadows. But it was also the only path that made her feel alive. Though no one dared speak them before the throne, Seraphina felt the undercurrent of unease rippling through the corridors. Courtiers leaned too close in conversation, their voices falling to hushed tones as she entered a chamber. Members of her council exchanged knowing glances, their eyes too sharp, too curious. Something stirred beneath the polished surface of courtly grace, and though they masked it with bows and smiles, she recognized the scent of rumor. One morning, as she broke her fast with the Duchess of Montclair, a sharp-tongued woman who never missed the chance to press for gossip, the dagger was slipped between words of honey. "Your Majesty," the Duchess said, sipping her wine with exaggerated delicacy, "it is said a lady of high bearing has been seen wandering the lower streets at night, disguised, if the stories are to be believed. What a scandal, should such a tale find substance." Seraphina did not flinch, though her heart thundered beneath her bodice. She set her cup down with measured grace. "The city delights in stories," she replied, her tone calm but cool. "They weave fantasies from shadows. Best not to give them weight, lest they grow into monsters." The Duchess's painted lips curved in a sly smile, as if she had caught a flicker of truth hidden beneath the Queen's mask. "Indeed, monsters are dangerous things, are they not?" That night, Seraphina stood before her mirror long after her handmaidens had retired. The face staring back at her was regal, composed, framed by a crown that glittered with the weight of nations. Yet beneath the jewels and silks, she saw the woman who had walked cobblestone alleys, who had knelt beside a wounded soldier, who had laughed beneath the stars like a girl freed from chains. 2 lives, 2 selves, and the threads between them frayed thinner each day. Still, she could not abandon Chaol. When she returned to him, cloaked as ever, she found him stronger than before. He no longer leaned heavily upon her arm, though he walked with care. The healer had even begun to mutter that he would soon outgrow her patient bed, that he must return to the world beyond her walls. "You'll be glad of that," Chaol said with a wry smile, catching the healer's grumbles. "No more burden weighing down your evenings." But Seraphina shook her head. "You are no burden, Chaol." The words escaped her lips before she could temper them. His gaze softened, searching her face as though to read the truth she held back. For a heartbeat, she feared he might pierce through every veil, see the crown hidden behind her lowered hood. But he only reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing her gloved ones. "You have given me more kindness than I deserved," he murmured. "I will not forget it. It should have been simple, a soldier's gratitude." Yet in his voice was something deeper, unspoken but undeniable, and when his thumb grazed her knuckles, Seraphina felt her composure waver, her breath unsteady. In that moment she was not a queen. She was not the widow of Elisoria. She was only a woman caught in the quiet storm of a man's nearness. But the storm outside was growing darker. One evening, as she slipped back into the palace, she was halted by Lord Halvith, the Master of Arms, a man loyal but not blind. He bowed, yet his eyes narrowed upon her cloak damp with night dew. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "these are troubled times. The city is restless. Soldiers return from the borders with heavy tales. You would do well to remain within the palace walls." Her throat tightened. Did he know? Or was it only caution born of duty? She forced a serene smile. "Your concern honors me, Lord Halvith, but I am safe enough within these walls." He bowed again, yet his gaze lingered too long, too knowingly, before he departed. That night's sleep eluded her. She dreamed of Chaol's hand in hers, of whispers in shadowed halls, of a crown slipping from her head and shattering on the marble floor. The next day, in council, she signed decrees with a steady hand, her voice calm as she listened to reports of unrest along the borders. But beneath the veneer of order, her mind reeled. The kingdom was fragile, stretched thin by war and want. One misstep, one scandal could fracture the faith of her people. And yet, when night fell, she found herself again at the healer's door, drawn as surely as the tide to the moon. Chaol was waiting, his eyes alight with something that quickened her pulse. "Sarah," he said softly, as though her name alone were prayer enough. "There are things I would tell you. If only I could be certain you would stay to hear them." Her heart trembled, caught between terror and longing. She wanted to silence him, to keep safe the fragile veil between them. Yet she could not deny the way her soul leaned toward his, reckless and yearning. Outside, the city whispered, Inside, the crown waited. But in that small, dim, lit room, Serafina felt only the dangerous nearness of a soldier whose presence had become the center of her world. Summer waned into the first chill of autumn, and with it Cale's strength returned in earnest. His steps grew steadier, his shoulders no longer stooped with pain. The healer, though grateful for her patient's recovery, grew less tolerant of his presence. "You are mended enough," she told him curtly one evening, her gnarled hands busy with a mortar of herbs. "I cannot keep you here forever. A soldier must find his road again, or he will bring trouble upon us all." Kiel only smiled faintly, though Serafina caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. Trouble. The word carried a weight she knew too well. For each night she lingered in that humble room, the threads of secrecy drew tighter around her neck, and yet she could not keep away. Their conversations had grown longer, their silences heavier. Sometimes Kyle would speak of battles past, his voice low, as though confessing sins to the dark. Other times, Serafina found herself telling him of the palace gardens, of the roses that bloomed pale as moonlight, of the swans that glided upon the royal lake. She cloaked her words carefully, never naming the palace as her own, yet the truth shimmered between her sentences like gold hidden in the seams of cloth. One evening, as the wind rattled the shutters and the fire burned low, Kyle looked at her with an intensity that silenced every thought in her head. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I do not know who you are, not truly, but I know what I feel when you are near." Her breath caught. The air seemed to narrow to the space between them, fragile and charged. "I should not speak it," he continued, his voice roughened by restraint. "I am no one of consequence, just a soldier scarred and spent, and you are more than you allow me to see. But still," he broke off, shaking his head as though to cage back words too dangerous. Still, she heard them, felt them, and in the aching silence that followed, her heart answered with a fierceness that frightened her. Yet the world beyond their fragile sanctuary was closing in. In the palace, Lord Halvith grew more watchful. He had dispatched men into the city, their task cloaked in the pretense of rooting out unrest. But Serafina knew what he sought, the cloaked figure who slipped through alleys when the moon was high. Each night, her escape grew riskier. Each dawn, she returned with fear threading her spine. One night, upon re-entering the palace gates, she found her lady, in waiting, Alira awake and waiting. The girl was young, loyal, but her eyes brimmed with questions she dared not ask. She whispered, as Serafina removed her damp cloak, "You walk dangerous roads. If the council knew, if the people guessed." Serafina placed a finger gently to her lips. "Say nothing, Alira. What I do with eyes open. Trust me." Alira's eyes glistened, torn between duty and devotion. At last she bowed, but her silence was heavy with fear. The following evening, Serafina hesitated longer than usual before leaving her chambers. The weight of the crown pressed like iron, urging her to remain. Yet the pull of Kale's presence was stronger, relentless as the tide. She went. Kyle greeted her with a smile that made her heart ache. He had trimmed his hair, cleaned his soldier's coat, and though the scars upon his face remained, there was a light in his eyes she had not seen before. "Hope, I walked today," he told her with quiet pride, not just to the square, but beyond. The air was crisp, the leaves turning gold. It felt as though I had been given the world anew. She smiled, though fear pricked her. The more he ventured into the city, the greater the chance someone might notice him, might notice her. They sat together, the fire casting their shadows upon the wall, and though words of caution rose to her lips, what escaped instead was a whisper carried by longing. "Kale, what if the world were not as it seems? What if those we believe bound by duty could still choose their hearts?" He turned toward her, his gaze searching. "Then I would hope such a soul might choose me." The air between them tightened, fragile as spun glass. His hand moved, slow, hesitant, until it rested over hers. She did not pull away. She could not, for in that moment every oath she had sworn, every crown she bore seemed distant, shadows against the light of his touch. But shadows lingered, for beyond the healer's door, unseen in the night, a figure watched. A palace guard, cloaked and silent, had trailed her through the winding streets. His eyes widened at the sight of the hooded woman beside the soldier. He could not yet see her face, but suspicion blazed in his mind. The first frost of the season glistened on the palace gardens when Serafina awoke to the sound of raised voices. Beyond her chamber doors, the council argued, their tones sharp as blades. She entered the chamber to find Lord Halvith standing at the center, a scroll clutched in his gauntleted hand. "Your Majesty," he said with a bow that was respectful, yet heavy with implication. "Reports from the city grow troubling. A cloaked woman of noble bearing by her posture and speech has been seen frequently in the poorer quarters. She tends to a soldier of unknown rank. Such behavior invites scandal and danger." The council murmured agreement, their faces masks of concern veiling curiosity. Seraphina's pulse thundered, yet her voice remained even. "Rumors are the currency of idle tongues. I will not govern by gossip." Lord Halvith's eyes lingered upon her, dark with suspicion. "And yet, Majesty, even idle tongues may ignite flame. Should the people believe their queen walks among them in disguise, the throne itself could be imperiled." She dismissed the council with measured calm, but inside her composure cracked. The shadows that had sheltered her secret now seemed thin, riddled with watchful eyes. That evening, as she prepared to leave her chambers, Elira blocked the door. Her lady-in-waiting's face was pale, her hands trembling. "Please, my queen," she begged, voice breaking. "They are watching you. I have heard the guards whisper. If they discover where you go, if they discover who you see." Seraphina placed her hand gently on the girl's cheek. "I know the risk, Elira, but there are things worth risking, even a crown." Tears shimmered in Elira's eyes, but she stepped aside. "Then let me at least pray that you return safely." Seraphina left, her cloak drawn tight, her heart pounding like a drum. When she reached the healer's dwelling, Kyle was waiting. He looked stronger than ever, his frame no longer frail with sickness. He greeted her not with words, but with a look that made her breath falter. A look that spoke of devotion, of questions unspoken but urgent. "I feared you would not come tonight," he said softly. She sank into the chair beside him, her hands folded to still their trembling. The palace watches more closely. Whispers grow louder. "Because of me." She met his gaze. "Because of us." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, fragile and heavy. Then Kale reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. His touch was warm, steady, a lifeline in the storm. "I do not know your secrets," he said, voice low but firm, "but I know what you are to me. The thought of losing you, of never seeing you walk through that door again, is a wound I could not endure." Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell him everything, to cast aside the crown and bare her heart. But the weight of her oath, of her people, of a nation balanced on her shoulders, held her tongue. Instead, she whispered, "Kale," and nothing more, her voice breaking on the edge of truth. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, reverent as a vow. The gesture unraveled her, left her trembling with the force of love she dared not confess. Outside, a shadow stirred. The same god who had trailed her before now watched again, closer, his eyes narrowing as lamplight briefly illuminated the line of her jaw beneath the hood. Recognition flickered, unformed but perilously near. Inside, oblivious to the danger, Seraphina and Kyle lingered in a silence that spoke more than words. Their closeness was no longer innocent, no longer safe. The line between gratitude and love had been crossed, and there would be no retreat. As she left that night, the air bit with cold, and the streets felt narrower, the eyes of the city sharper. She sensed the veil of her disguise thinning, threads pulled taut to breaking. And yet, despite the peril, her heart whispered the truth. She dared not speak aloud. She loved him. And love, once awakened, would not be silenced. The palace air grew colder, sharper with autumn's bite. Leaves fell across marble courtyards like drops of gold and rust, and the council spoke often of looming winter, of supplies for the poor, of unrest in the border villages. Yet behind every report, every cautious glance, Seraphina felt the same unspoken question: where does the queen go when the moon rises? She bore it silently, moving through her days with a queen's composure, though her nights belonged elsewhere. Belonged to Kyle. The healer had finally pressed him to leave her home, insisting her space was no refuge for wayward soldiers and mysterious visitors. Kale did not protest. Instead, he had taken to wandering the quieter edges of the city, his steps slow but steady, his body mending with every passing day. Seraphina found him now not in the healer's dim chamber, but beneath the open sky, in quiet courtyards, by the crumbling stone of old city walls, in gardens overrun with autumn vines. It was there, in the hidden corners of the world, that they spoke more freely than ever. One evening, she found him leaning against a weathered arch, the dying sun casting amber fire across his face. He smiled when he saw her, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, bright and unguarded. "I thought perhaps you would not come," he said. "I should not have," she whispered, though she stepped closer all the same. His smile softened. "And yet, here you are." For a time they walked together in silence, their shoulders brushing now, and then, each touch sparking like flint against steel. When they reached a quiet garden, its fountain cracked and silent with age, Cale stopped. He turned to her with an intensity that made her breath falter. "Sarah," he said, voice low, steady, "I can no longer keep it unspoken. I do not care who you are, nor what secrets you keep. All I know is that my heart is no longer my own. It belongs to you." The words hung in the fading light, heavy with truth. Serafina's throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She had carried her secret like a shield, but his confession pierced it with ease. Her every oath, her every duty, pressed against her chest like iron, demanding silence. Yet her heart, her yearning, aching heart, rose louder. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it touched his cheek. "Cale," she whispered, "I am bound by more than you can see. The path I walk is not my own." He caught her hand, pressing it against his skin as though to anchor her there. "Then let me walk it with you, whatever it is, wherever it leads." The dam within her broke. She leaned into him, her forehead against his, her breath mingling with his own. And in that fragile space between restraint and surrender, the truth slipped from her lips like a prayer long held. "I love you." His arms closed around her, strong and certain, pulling her against him as though he had waited lifetimes for the moment. His lips found hers, hesitant at first, then sure, then fervent. The kiss was not of courtly politeness or stolen indulgence, but of two souls colliding, reckless and real. For the first time since her husband's death, Serafina felt wholly alive. No crown, no duty, no grief, only the pulse of love surging through her, undeniable and fierce. When at last they broke apart, breathless, Cale pressed his forehead to hers, his smile trembling with wonder. "Then, whatever shadows come, let them come. We have this. We have us." But even as he spoke, shadows stirred beyond the garden walls. For they were not alone. Hidden among the ivy and stone, the same palace guard crouched, his eyes wide with certainty at last. He had seen the cloaked woman's face fully revealed in the fading light. He had seen the queen herself in the arms of a soldier. By dawn, the whisper would reach Lord Halvith. By dusk, the court would know, and the crown Serafina bore would hang by a thread. Morning broke with the toll of bells, their sound heavy, foreboding. Serafina, weary from a night that had burned her lips with Cale's kiss and her soul with equal parts joy and dread, entered the council chamber to find the air taut with anticipation. Lord Halvith stood at the center, the guard who had spied upon her kneeling at his side. In the soldier's hand gleamed a strip of dark fabric, a fragment of her cloak, torn as she had slipped past the garden wall the night before. Halvith's gaze was sharp as he bowed. "Your Majesty, forgive the boldness of what I bring before you. But last night this man witnessed a figure of noble bearing in the lower city. Not just any figure. He claims it was you." The chamber stilled. The courtiers leaned forward like wolves scenting blood. Serafina's heart beat in her throat, but her face remained a mask of calm. "Claims," she said coolly. A dangerous word, when wielded by those who seek to stir unrest. But the guard, trembling yet resolute, lifted his eyes. "Forgive me, my queen, but I saw you, in the arms of a soldier, a common soldier. The people whisper, but I saw." The words fell like stones into water, rippling through the chamber. Halvith's voice was heavy, deliberate. "If this is true, Majesty, it places the crown in peril. The kingdom cannot endure scandal when unrest already stirs at the borders. The people must see their queen as untouchable, sovereign, not entangled with a man of the streets." For the first time, Serafina felt the walls of her palace close in like a prison. Her secret, once hers alone, now lay in the hands of men who measured loyalty in power, not in love. "I will hear no further on this matter," she declared, rising to her feet, her crown catching the light. "My actions are my own, and my throne remains unshaken." But as she turned to leave, Halvith's voice followed her, low and edged with threat. "The council will not stay silent forever, Your Majesty, nor will your people. Secrets once seen cannot be unseen." That night she found Cale waiting by the old garden fountain, his expression shadowed. He had heard the whispers already, rumors spreading faster than wildfire. "They know," he said, his voice tight. "Don't they?" She nodded, her cloak slipping from her shoulders as if the weight of it had become too much. "The guard saw us." Halvith brought it to council. Cal raked a hand through his dark hair, his jaw clenched. "Then it is I who must leave. If I go, the scandal fades. They will forget me. You can still protect your crown." Her heart clenched, fierce and desperate. "No, don't you see? They will not forget. They will not forgive. If you leave, I lose you, and if you stay, I risk everything else. The crown, the kingdom." He caught her shoulders, his eyes blazing with devotion and fear alike. "Then tell me, Seraphina, tell me, not as queen but as woman, what do you choose?" Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to cry you, to cast aside crown and duty, to flee into the world with him at her side. But behind his face rose the vision of her people, the farmers who looked to her decrees for bread, the soldiers who marched beneath her banner, the children who carried her name in their songs. "I cannot," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not yet. Not while they need me." Akel's hands fell away, his chest rising with the effort of restraining despair. "And what of me? Am I to vanish into shadow while you stand gilded in light?" Her silence was answer enough. For the first time since she had found him bleeding in an alley, Kale turned from her. The distance between them felt wider than oceans, deeper than the gulf between throne and soldier. But even as her heart fractured, the choice pressed closer. For in the palace, Halvith was already preparing his move, summoning advisors, penning decrees, weaving nets of power. By dawn, Seraphina would be forced to face not only Kale's heart, but her kingdom's wrath. The great hall was colder than winter itself. Tapestries swayed in the draft of high windows, their embroidered battles seeming to mock her with silent judgment. Seraphina sat upon her throne, crown steady upon her brow, but her heart roiled like a storm-tossed sea. The council stood arrayed before her. At their center was Lord Halvith, the strip of her cloak laid bare upon the marble floor, like evidence at a trial. His voice rang out for all to hear. "Your Majesty, the council has deliberated. A queen who binds herself to a common soldier invites unrest. Already the whispers spread beyond these walls. Merchants speak it in the markets, beggars cry it in the alleys. The kingdom trembles at the thought of a throne sullied by scandal." Murmurs swept the chamber, a tide of disapproval. Some faces were veiled in pity, others in cold satisfaction. Halvith's words cut deeper. "We do not question your virtue, Majesty, but the crown must be preserved. For that the soldier must be seized, banished. If not executed." The words struck like a blade to her chest. "Executed." Seraphina rose, her silken skirts whispering against the stone. "You speak of loyalty while plotting betrayal. That soldier you condemn. He fought beneath our banners, blood for this land while you sat in comfort. His life is worth more than your whispers." Gasps fluttered like startled birds. To defend him openly was dangerous, reckless. Yet she could not let silence condemn Kale. Halvith's eyes narrowed. "Then you admit it. You admit he holds your heart." Silence fell so heavy it seemed to press upon the very walls. Seraphina's lips parted, but no denial came. Her silence was answer enough. Halvith bowed stiffly, though his triumph was sharp. "Then forgive me, Majesty, but duty compels me. The gods ride even now to seize him." Her heart lurched. She could picture Kale in the old garden, waiting for her, unaware of the net closing around him. Panic rose in her chest, fierce and unqueenly. She dismissed the council with a sweep of her hand, her voice commanding though her blood thundered. "Leave me, all of you." When the hall emptied, Seraphina fled. Down corridors, through gates, into the city she once traversed, cloaked and unseen. Now she moved with desperation, her crown hidden, her breath ragged. The streets blurred around her. All she could see was Kyle. She found him not in the garden, but at the edge of the old city wall, his face turned toward the horizon as though dreaming of a world beyond. Relief and dread crashed through her at once. "Kale," she gasped, running to him. "They know. The council knows. Halvith has sent guards to take you." He caught her hands, searching her face. "Then come with me, now, before they find us. We can vanish beyond the forests, across the sea. You would be free." Her heart cried yes. Every part of her ached to seize his hand, to run, to shed crown and duty like a discarded cloak. She could almost feel it, the wind of freedom, the warmth of his arm around her, the promise of a life unbound. But then she saw their kingdom in her mind's eye, the children who sang her name, the widows who looked to her decrees for bread, the soldiers who would march leaderless into chaos. Her voice broke. Kale, if I go, the kingdom shatters. If I stay, I lose you. He cupped her face, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. Then which is it, Seraphina? Which will you choose? Before she could answer, the thunder of hooves broke the night. Torches flared along the walls, shadows stretching like blades. The guards had come, armored and swift. Kale stepped in front of her, hand reaching instinctively for the sword he no longer carried. A soldier unarmed, yet defiant. Seraphina's cry tore the air. No, the night was a blaze of iron and fire. Torches flickered against the stone walls, their flames reflected in the soldiers' helmets as they advanced. Kale stood unarmed, his jaw set, his body angled protectively in front of Seraphina as if he could shield her with his very flesh. Halveth's command rang out. Take him. The guard surged forward. Kale did not flinch, though his hands clenched at his sides. But before they reached him, Seraphina's voice thundered across the courtyard, fierce as the clash of steel. Stand down. The soldiers froze, their boots grinding against the cobblestones. Seraphina stepped forward, her cloak falling back to reveal the crown that glimmered upon her brow. Firelight caught the gold, turning her into something more than mortal. Queen and woman, ruler and lover, unhidden at last. Her voice carried like a blade. If any man lays hand upon him, he lays hand upon me. The guards hesitated, torn between oath and order. None dared move. Halveth's face twisted, his triumph faltering. Majesty, this folly will undo you. A queen cannot bind herself to a soldier. The people will not accept it. The crown will not endure. Seraphina's gaze was steady, her voice ringing with a calm born of fire. The crown does not endure on cold duty alone. It endures because the people believe in the heart that wears it. I have walked among them. Halved, I have seen their hunger, their grief, their need for hope. They do not want a queen of marble and ice. They want a queen who feels, who chooses love, who remembers she is as human as they. A murmur rippled through the soldiers, uncertain, moved. Halveth's fury sharpened. And what of order? What of tradition? You would risk the stability of a kingdom for him. Seraphina turned, her eyes meeting Kale's. The weight of crown and heart pressed upon her, but her voice did not falter. I will not choose between them. I will unite them. He is no common soldier to me. He is the proof that this throne still belongs to its people. If that is treason to you, Halveth, then mark me guilty. Her declaration shattered the silence like thunder. The soldiers looked to one another, then back to her, one by one, knees bent. They knelt before their queen, not for the council, not for tradition, but for her. Halveth stood alone, rigid with rage, the tide of loyalty slipping from his grasp. His hand went to his sword, but before steel could flash, two guards stepped forward, seizing him by the arms. His authority was broken. Kyle, still at her side, breathed her name, awed and disbelieving. Seraphina. Her hand found his, trembling yet sure. You asked what I would choose. Tonight I choose both, my crown and my heart, and heaven help the man who dares divide them again. The night settled into stillness. The torches burned lower, their flames no longer threatening but warm. The soldiers dispersed under her command, leaving only Seraphina and Kale beneath the autumn stars. He turned to her, his eyes searching, voice unsteady. You have risked everything. She smiled through the tears on her cheeks, her crown gleaming faintly in the firelight. No, I have given everything. For my people, for you, for us. And when she drew him close, pressing her lips to his, it was not in secrecy, nor in fear, but in triumph. A love bared to the night, stronger than scandal, stronger than crown. From that night onward, the songs sung in the kingdom told not only of the queen who ruled with wisdom, but of the queen who dared to love. And beside her, always, stood the soldier who became her heart's chosen, no longer hidden, no longer secret, but eternal. The queen's secret soldier was secret no more.